You're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. My name is Simon Rusnak. Rent, one of the most influential modern musicals, returns to Rainbow Stage this week. Loosely based on Puccini's La Bohème, the rock musical follows a group of artists, performers, and philosophers as they struggle through hardship and the AIDS epidemic, while still finding love, friendship, and the art of creation. To hear more about the production, I'm joined by Rainbow Stage Artistic Director Carson Nattrass and actor Elliot Lazar. Hello to you both.
Hello.
Well, thank you so much for having us this morning.
Carson, first off, we've chatted a lot virtually. So glad that you've joined me in the studio for the first time in a real long time.
It feels really special. Thank you for inviting us into the studio. It's nice to finally be here in person.
Well, anytime. This is a production that premiered nearly 30 years ago, a Pulitzer Prize, Tony Award-winning work, one of the longest-running Broadway shows in history. What do you think it is about Rent, Carson, that has kept it resonating and relevant?
You know, that's a really good question. It came out when I was a teenager, and it did for Broadway what Chorus Line had done previously and what Hamilton did not so many years ago. It just revolutionized how you can tell stories through music. It's an art form that keeps reinventing itself. And Rent was one of these pivotal moments where it brought rock into the musical theater genre, but while also telling new stories. It started to bring communities and underserved communities that had never been on stage before. And it just really spoke to the youth. And now I've got a 14-year-old of my own who, I was just talking to Elliot about Tick, Tick, Boom, which is about the author, Jonathan Larson. And when that was done, my son says, I want to see Rent. And I thought, you know what? This is really interesting, the way that things can, history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it echoes. Mm-hmm. And it's time for a new generation to kind of feel the impact of how amazing the show is.
Yeah, you mentioned Tick, Tick, Boom. People can watch it on Netflix. It's streaming. Andrew Garfield, and it's directed by Lin-Manuel Miranda. It's such a fantastic movie musical. You mentioned what this production did when it premiered. One written by, music by, lyrics by Jonathan Larson. And there was this great quote in the New York Times where he talked about how he wanted to bring musicals to the MTV generation. And that's exactly what he does in this work, right? The idea of a rock musical.
That's right. And the music was composed to also be able to hit the radio waves. And so it reached into the culture in a new way. To be fair, musicals prior to that had also had that impact, but that had grown stale with new generations. And he was like, how do we reach them in that way? And you can pull cuts out of this and just listen to it like a pop hit. Yeah,
exactly that. Elliot, you've also joined us here in studio, and I'm probably putting this mildly, but I know you're a bit of a musical theater buff yourself. Is there anything in listening to what Carson was just saying that you'd like to add about Rent and what it did as a musical and continues to do?
Yeah, I mean the pop appeal is a big part of that, and that historically, you go back to the heyday of Broadway, and the Rat Pack were all producing covers of Broadway tunes. Mm-hmm. The Jazz Age, all of that, it was huge. And then kind of nothing until Hair came on the scene and was a rock show and had some popular covers. I know the Jackson 5 covered some of the songs from Hair. But then even after Hair, and by the time Jonathan Larson was coming up and getting established, the music on Broadway did not reflect the music that young people were listening to, and young people were not coming to Broadway. Those stories weren't being told and their music wasn't being played. And a big thing that Rent did, in addition to reaching this audience just with their content, was they also pioneered rush tickets, which is now something that's prevalent in the theater industry, that on Broadway you could go and see this show for $20.
Yeah.
Which was huge. It brought in a whole new audience, and it brought in the people that the work was intended for in a big way.
Yeah, and the accessibility of the work too, right? I mean, the idea of rush ticket sales. I mean, there's so much, and this is just one of those sort of linchpins in history in terms of just how important this production is. For the Classic 107 audience, I mentioned that this is sort of loosely based on Puccini's La Bohème. And I mean, parallels can be found not in terms of well, I mean, in terms of the subject matter, yes, but also in terms of the characters themselves. I mean, Mimi, for instance, and the relationship with Rodolfo and with Roger in Rent. Unlike those characters, Maureen Johnson and Mark Cohen in Rent have a very different relationship than their parallels, if we can call them that in Bohème, Musetta and Marcello. Elliot, you're going to be performing the role of Mark. Can you tell us about the character?
Yeah. Mark is an aspiring filmmaker who, at the start of the show, decides to pivot into documentary filmmaking. He feels his scripts are not very strong, and so he decides he's going to document the lives of him and his friends. And it follows. He follows his friends' lives and his own over the course of a year. And Mark, his relationship to Maureen, the Musetta equivalent, is that they had been dating, and she had cheated on him with a woman, and is now with that woman, Joanne, in the show, who's kind of an amalgam of Marcello and Alcindoro, and he is very much hung up on Maureen for a lot of the action of the play, and so his journey is learning how to live more fully in the moment and not just as a documentarian, as an observer, but as a participant in life.
And he really becomes sort of he really comes to the forefront of life in terms of what he does, in terms of the bohemian movement, if we can call it that, right? In terms of the character too. Yeah.
I think his journey is riding that line between what is it to observe and to participate fully, and how can you capture something and document it when, by nature of doing that, you'd have to put yourself outside of it to a degree, which is a question that I think a lot of artists ask ourselves because we're in the business of representing life in all of its unique forms.
So that's a great segue to my next question. You're Winnipeg born and raised. You studied at the U of M before grad studies at Berkeley and Boston. You freelance as a coach between New York, Boston, Winnipeg, while also working as an actor, singer, writer, multi-instrumentalist, music copyist. You sort of do it all.
Whatever they let me do.
Audiences may remember you as Flounder in The Little Mermaid a few years back. How's it feel to be returning to Rainbow Stage?
It's incredible. I grew up going to Rainbow. I grew up like 5 minutes away from Kildonan Park off of Leela, and remember taking bike trips with my babysitter down there. I loved going to see Rainbow Stage as a kid. And then Little Mermaid was my first big job. And that was such a huge thing to do at Rainbow. So it feels incredible to be back 9 years later.
Has it seriously been 9 years?
It's been 9 years.
Oh, no.
It's been 9 years. And what 9 years they've been.
Yeah.
And it's incredible to be back because it's an artistic home for me, and it's like a literal home for me.
This is something that you and I, Carson, have talked a lot about, is, that the strong ties to Rainbow Stage and all the memories that the people share. We've talked about the sound sort of wafting out over Kildonan Park on one side of the river or the other. I mean, you can really hear it all over. It is sort of a beacon for the arts. But I'm wondering, for those who maybe don't have that same connection, that same tie to Rainbow Stage, why do you think they should head down this summer to check out Rent and the rest of the season?
Well, it's a theater unlike any in the country. So there's truly nothing like it. And so if you're maybe interested as a Winnipegger in taking in something that you couldn't see anywhere else, it's kind of a getaway in your own city. Primarily, when people think about us doing Rent, they think we're maybe taking a step like in a different direction from the family shows that we do. But now that my son is 14, it's like you don't cease to be a family when your kids become teens. And if you're looking for a reason to get yourself and your kids off of screens, getting some fresh air, getting out with the family, Rent is that show. It's an open-air theater that goes rain or shine. It has that iconic giant dome over top, and it seats 2,000 people. It's, and like you said, like you can sit in there and have this magical experience knowing that that sound is, reaching across the city. as a beacon for the arts. I like that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Thanks. And, well, we've got 525,600 reasons for you to head down to Rainbow Stage to close out this interview. It all opens on Wednesday, June 28th, runs through July 16th. Plenty of opportunity to check out the show because, again, Rainbow Stage with their wonderful long runs, it really feels like a start of summer. I've been saying that all June. But right after Jazz Fest to get hit with Rainbow Stage, I mean, it is just peak summer in Winnipeg, and it's only just beginning. So, so thrilled that you both taken the time to swing by the studio this morning. Great seeing you both.
Nice seeing you too. Thank you
and
so much.
For more details, rainbowstage.ca, the place to go.